Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea continues to battle a third wave of COVID-19. The number of new cases is back above 500, and the authorities warn it could rise to above 1,000 a day if it's not soon brought under control. Tomorrow, close to 500,000 South Koreans will be taking the nationwide college entrance exam, so the authorities are taking extra precautions to make sure everyone can take the test safely. And South Korea's National Assembly is expected to vote this evening on next year's government budget, having agreed on a proposal worth around $500 billion US. Today is the legal deadline for it to be passed. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. The number of COVID-19 cases in South Korea today is back above 500, despite the stricter social distancing measures in effect in the greater Seoul area. Tomorrow will be a major challenge for the country in making sure that close to 500,000 people, mostly high school seniors, can take the national college entrance exam safely. Kim Yeon-sung reports.
South Korea on Wednesday reported a total of 511 COVID-19 infections. The daily virus tally has topped 500 again after 4 days in the 400s. Local transmissions accounted for 493 infections on Wednesday, 356 of which were from the greater Seoul area. Health authorities and medical experts have warned that if the virus isn't successfully contained in the next few days, the nation could see over 1,000 daily cases in the next week or so. 500,000 students are due to sit the Korean National College entrance exam this Thursday, amid several cases from schools and education facilities. On Tuesday, 8 cases were reported at a high school in Seoul's Gurogu district and 14 from a cram school in Gangnam-gu district. Health authorities are taking extra precautions to make sure the upcoming test sites of the college entrance exam don't become a hotbed for the virus.
Tomorrow is the college entrance exam. The government will extend the working hours of health clinics to 10 p.m. today. We'll also operate an emergency response system so that even the infected or quarantined can sit the exam.
Currently, 70,000 people are in self-quarantine after coming into contact with a patient, the highest number of people in self-quarantine since the start of the pandemic. The Prime Minister on Wednesday morning said that this weekend will be critical in turning the tide of the current outbreak. Kim Yeon-sung, Arirang News.
The college entrance exam tomorrow will be one of the most important events in the lives of these young people. A few of them will be in quarantine, though, and some could even come down with symptoms on test day. So our Kim Do-yeon explains the measures the government's taking to make sure that they're still able to take the test.
Thursday is a day of National College Entrance Exam, or CSAT, for students aspiring to enter college next year. And they will have to take the exam in the middle of a pandemic. But what if a student gets confirmed with COVID-19 just before the day they have spent years studying for? According to the Education Ministry and the health authorities, the student will still be able to take the test.
So far, the Education Ministry has been preparing by classifying the exam takers as regular, quarantined, and confirmed COVID-19 patients to place them accordingly and have put in strict prevention measures to provide a safe test-taking environment.
First, every test taker will need to have their body temperature checked at the door. If the temperature shows 37.5 degrees Celsius or higher after additional checks, he or she will have to take the exam at a separate designated room for those with symptoms. If an exam taker has symptoms the day before the exam and wants to voluntarily take the COVID-19 test, the COVID-19 testing site will be open until 10 p.m. for them. The result will be back by midnight. If the result comes out positive, then they will be transported to a hospital or care center and take the exam there. Lastly, if someone has been put in quarantine before the exam day, he or she can report to a separate location set up for them. This person is not allowed to use public transportation. Currently, the Education Ministry says there are around 200 available beds for students with COVID-19 to take the test. As of Wednesday, there are 37 patients who are up for the exam this year. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's National Assembly is expected to vote this evening on next year's government budget. The ruling and opposition parties reached an agreement on a bill yesterday worth around $500 billion US. If they do pass it by today, the legal deadline, it'll be the first time they've done so in 6 years. Choi Jung-yoon has the details.
558 trillion won, or roughly $504 billion US for 2021. South Korea's biggest ever budget is to be put up for a full floor vote on Wednesday evening. This comes after the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party reached an agreement on Tuesday to pass the bill with an additional increase of 2.2 trillion won from the initial proposal in order to counter the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. That extra amount will be covered by national bonds. This was the first time in 11 years that the budget was higher than the proposal. 3 trillion won, or some $2.7 billion, will be allocated for a third round of assistance funds for small business owners and self-employed people hit hard by the recent resurgence of COVID-19 cases. The ruling party is aiming to provide the relief funds before the Lunar New Year holiday in early February. The 2021 budget will also include $814 million earmarked for the purchase of COVID-19 vaccines. According to the ruling party, with the $3 million already secured, it will be enough to provide vaccinations for 44 million people. Other extra spending is aimed at stabilizing housing, expanding care facilities, and helping the country achieve the 2050 net zero carbon emission targets. But there were some cuts to funds related to Korean New Deal. Should the bill pass at the National Assembly's plenary session as planned, it will be the first time in 6 years that the budget has been approved on time. Choi Jung-yoon, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, thank you for coming back on.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks on Wall Street on the first day of December rose to new record highs, apparently hopes growing for a vaccine and for economic stimulus. What's the story in the global markets?
Okay, well, there are basically three factors to be considered. As you mentioned, the assistance package from the Congress, they seem to have made quite a bit of a headway. Now, originally, the Republicans wanted about $1 trillion package, while the Democrats wanted about $2 trillion worth of package. But from the latest U.S. news, they seem to be agreeing on a $900 billion assistance package. So it's considerably smaller than what Democrats wanted. It's closer to what the Republicans wanted, though there seems to be some grumbling among some Republican congressmen that even that is too high. But it's supposed to involve additional assistance, including $300 assistance for unemployed, which is given above the amount of unemployment insurance that they would normally get. And then the second factor is the vaccine. There's more and more optimism about the vaccine, and the U.S. government is announcing that the first recipients of the vaccine should get there before the end of the year. So they're moving very, very quickly. And then finally, there's the momentum that was building in November. Dow had the best monthly performance since January of 1987. S&P and NASDAQ, they had the best monthly performance since April of this year. So all of those things seem to be feeding the optimism of the market. The European market more or less followed the American lead. It was down on Monday, but it came back on Tuesday, and they just opened up, and we'll see how it does today. The Asian markets, the Nikkei has been continually going up. Shanghai and Hong Kong, they've been mostly level for this week, though they're down slightly. And then Kospi hit a historical high today, and it has gone up by 1.58% today, and it seems to be feeding with the same factors that we see in the United States, the momentum, as well as the vaccine, as well as the U.S. Agreement on the assistance package. And Kosdaq, it has risen today as well by 0.90%.
Well, today in Korea is the deadline for next year's government budget. The National Assembly has agreed to a budget of 558 trillion won, which is about $500 billion. This is actually more than the government asked for, which is the first time that's happened in more than a decade. Tell us what's in this budget for 2021.
Okay, well, first of all, I think it's a very big accomplishment for them to get the budget finished before the deadline. And you have to remember the deadline was set in Korean Constitution. So for the past 6 years, when they did not keep the deadline, it meant that the National Assembly were ignoring the Constitution. So they finally got the budget under the deadline. That's good news. And then another possible good news is that they agreed on a compromise. That is to say, the third relief payment was part of the budget, and the ruling party and the opposition party, they've agreed on 7.5 trillion won of expenditure. They financed it by cutting the existing budget by 5.7 trillion won and then issuing debt for 2.2 trillion won. So in a sense, it was a compromise. I think that's always good news, though. Personally, I would have preferred all the money coming up from the existing budget because it's such a big budget. The last year's budget was only 519 trillion won, including the supplementary budgets. But this year, it was originally 556 trillion won. Now it is 558 trillion won. When you need to spend money, you have to spend money, and the coronavirus is a good justification for increasing the budget, but it'll be very difficult to keep on going on this path because by government's own estimates, by 2024, we'll be hitting the debt GDP ratio of more than 56%, and we cannot go on that type of a very high path forever. But for now, I think it was a fairly good compromise, and we need the third supplementary budget as well as some spending on the vaccine. So it's understandable, and I'm mildly satisfied. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well, we see now that consumer prices in Korea rose by less than 1% in October, from a year earlier up 0.6%. To be precise, inflation's been stuck in that range for quite a while now. We've got about 1 minute left. What do you see happening with prices?
Okay, well, the good news, if you want to have some in this report, is that while the CPI inflation over the last month was minus 0.1%, the core inflation seems to be doing fairly well. If you look at the core inflation, which excludes agriculture and oil, it's plus 1.0% over the last 12 months. Core inflation, which excludes food and energy, it's plus 0.6%. So while it is still low, I think we can safely say that for now, we don't have to worry too much about deflation. Now, manufacturing over the last 12 months, manufacturing goods are still growing at a negative rate, minus 0.9%, but fresh food prices are still rising at a very high pace. This month it was 13.1%. So a lot of the inflation that we see are food prices, but still we seem to be out of danger for deflation, at least for now. We'll have to see if the inflation picks up. Inflation picking up right now is somewhat of a good news because that would mean that demand is picking up. But right now, we need the consumption demand to go up further if you want to have a domestic recovery.
All right, Professor, thanks so much for sharing your insights with us today. As always, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Korean firm JW Pharmaceutical is starting clinical trials abroad for its treatment for gout. Gout's a form of extremely painful inflammation in the joints, often afflicting people who are overweight. The company said Wednesday that its treatment, called Arthrifuge, is being tested in China. 40 healthy people will be taking part in the trial at the Shanghai Public Health Clinical Center. The company's already started a trial in South Korea with 140 participants, which it says is so far successful. The next phase is underway as well, with results due out early next year. The city of Seoul has been named the best international meeting destination at the 2020 Business Traveler Awards. Seoul has been rewarded for its efforts to actively support virtual meeting facilities and in building online platforms, as well as its technical skills to deal with events amid the pandemic. Seoul was chosen by subscribers to Business Traveler, who voted in July and August and picked Seoul for this award for the 7th time in a row. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.